Hello everyone. Today I want to dive into the soft hackles as deep as I can, so before we start, grab yourself a coffee and let's go. Now, soft hackle is a name for a very wide variety of feathers, and they can come from very wide variety of birds. Some come from game birds such as pheasants, ducks, mallards, partridge, different kinds of chicken-related birds, or smaller birds such as snipe, sparrows, starling, whatever you can get have some soft hackles. While these kind of, like, let's call them exotic feathers, for example, this bamboo partridge are really beautiful, or jay or snipe, uh, while they are really beautiful, they're not very readily available. And if they are available, they tend to be relatively or really expensive. Especially partridge became really expensive in recent years. So, for that matter, there is a very good solution, and it's called genetically bred chickens. So you have saddle, you have cape, and you have wide variety of colors. And I can argue that these are even better to tie with than, for example, partridge. Now let's dive into feather anatomy. When I say feather anatomy, I want to talk about the feather, how it's built, and what can you expect from a feather and certain parts of a feather. So every feather has a quill, that's the part that goes into the skin, and then you have a relatively thick and pithy rachis and some webby parts that are usable for certain flies, but we're talking about soft hackles here, and usually people tend to think about this part of the feather. Now, here, as you will notice, the rachis is much thinner, and thus it's much easier to wrap around something, hook in our case, and because of this thin part, it's very easy to wrap around. So what we need to know is how to use the feather and why the rachis is better to be thinner than thicker. Now look what happens if you get, this is the rachis near the quill end, so it's round, it's in cross section, it's very easy to rotate. So when you're trying to roll it around the hook, it may rotate, and then those barbs that you want to tie perpendicular to the hook shank, they tend to roll on you, to twist, and do all kind of funny stuff that you don't want. And when you go into the thinner part of the rachis becomes ovoid in shape, meaning oval with flat sides, and those flat sides will lay on the hook, and barbs will stick out perpendicular to the hook shank. So what you want to do, you want to use the feather where this rachis is thinner. Don't use the quill end of the rachis. Now that we covered very basic anatomy of the feather, let's get into applications. And for most part, the most basic applications would be just taking barbs and making tails out of it. Maybe you can also strip those barbs and stick them to the side of the hook and make some legs. You can also do legs by wrapping the hackle in a conventional way around the hook shank. That's something that I would prefer. And you can also make some wing case covers that are really easy to make with the soft hackles. And of course, you can use those tips to make some legs along and waste less material. If you just fold those barbs back, you will get nice legs on the side of your fly. So whether it's some floating nymph or just nymph or whatever you want to make, those legs can look really nice and you will waste less feather. In this video, I would like to focus a little bit more on conventional way of wrapping those legs, and it's just wrapping the hackle around the hook and how you should use it. There are usually two ways how you can do it. You can tie by the quill end, obviously not this close, but when I say quill end, I mean this part here. And in partridge feather, that part is much thicker, as you will notice. So if you tie your feather here, it's much thicker than if you were to tie, for example, some of these genetically bred chickens. So to use most of the feather, and as you can see, you can wrap more wraps with if you tie the feather with a tip, because the Reikis is thinner. So if you tie your feather by the tip, you will get on the same length of the hook more wraps from one feather than if you reverse everything and you tie your feather for the thicker end, and then when you start wrapping, the thicker end will just occupy most of the hook shank and you'll get 1, 2, 3 wraps and that's it. If that's what you want, perfectly fine, but usually you want to occupy less space, make less bulk, have more control over your feather, and that's exactly what you get by using the thinner part of the Reikis, which is a little bit flattened and wraps more beautifully than the thicker part of the feather. Now, something to consider, and it's really important to master it, and I'm still in the process of mastering it, is folding feather. Folding feather allows you to, well, wrap your hackle around the hook shank much more easily, and it's just more beautiful when you do it. So for that purpose, I'll just use this hen feather from the hen cape, white wing hen cape. I'll grab the Reikis with the hackle pliers, and depending, like if you want your shiny side to face towards the hook eye, then you're wrapping in a conventional direction. You want to move away those barbs that are hitting the hook first. Now, I want to move those, so I'll just stick my finger here. I'll place my thumb here to prevent rotating as much as possible, and then I'll just push with my index finger. I'll push those barbs that I want to move away. I'll push them over the Reikis. Yeah? Now, important part. You want to swipe your fingers down the feather and also crease the feather against your finger here. So something like this. And what happens here is you're making, as you're doing everything, you're making U shape. I'm not pulling those barbs back or something. No, I'm just creating this U shape with the Reikis, and that goes exactly through my fingers. So let's go do it again. So what I'm doing here, placing my thumb, pushing those barbs, and then just creasing and squeezing through my fingers. So like this. Okay, then I'll do it again. And that's it. You get yourself really nicely folded feather. And why is it important? Because when you're wrapping it, those barbs are literally obeying what you want to do. Like they're sweeping towards the bend of the hook, and nothing is sticking towards the eye, messing everything up. Like if you start wrapping and there is a barb sticking against your wrap, then everything is becoming messy, and you get those antenna-like barbs sticking all around that you have to cut later on. And let's just learn how to have more control over the materials. Length and width are also things to consider when it comes to those feathers. If you want more wraps or if you want to make more flies, obviously longer feather is much better. And here it comes again, what I just said before. Those genetically bred chickens, they have much longer feathers, as you can see here. These are not for very big hooks, but they are long, so you can make 3, even 4 flies out of one feather, maybe even more. But if you want to use any kind of soft hackle, traditional soft hackle, you can make 1, maybe 2, but that's a stretch. Usually just enough for 1, and then there is some waste. But those feathers also have relatively wide barbs. Usually they're not very good for small flies, very small flies here. While those, you can see that they have those tiny little feathers that are good for very small flies. And one more thing to consider here is that those feathers that are genetically bred, they have way more predictable Reikis than feathers from wild birds. When I say that, I mean they have just Reikis that's long and thin, and you know what to expect from it. Here, the transition between thick part and thin part is like very abrupt, like the taper is quite availability. Those genetically bred chickens, in my case, I'm a fan of whitening. Those are very available, relatively inexpensive. If you're not maniac when it comes to buying those things, if you just need a couple of colors, then it's relatively available, affordable, especially when you count in how many flies you can get from one cape or one saddle. That's quite amazing here, and it's available worldwide. Obviously, people in US are a little bit more blessed than the rest of us because they pay less for those feathers, but still, they are available and relatively inexpensive compared to, let's say, partridge. You can buy probably two of these for one partridge, and this comes in more color than partridge, and it's way easier to tie than partridge. It has more consistency, so it's. I think that these things are underestimated when it comes to soft hackles, in favor of wild birds. Even though wild birds have nice markings and nice natural colors. Uh, I think that those genetically bred have really beautiful colors too, especially something like this or grizzly or brown. Like they don't have those nice speckles, but still you can get some of those if you're lucky, obviously. Now I have to say something that some of you may not like, or even the company may not like. Hairline has relatively bad quality control. That's what I discovered, because almost always when I was buying some feathers from them, there was a lot of grease on them, feathers were damaged, and so on. And I just don't buy those feathers anymore from them because unless I can see the feather physically in my hands and check on it, I'm just not buying it. And this is really great opportunity for people who have some shops around them to just go over there and buy something locally where they inspect it and see really in person what the quality is actually about. I highly recommend buying like things that you can actually see and feel. To make an ant, I will use hook size 12. It's just for me, I don't know, I like the size 12 for this part of the world, because there are a lot of bugs around. It's a very humid area, and a lot of bugs are falling down from trees, so I'm not necessarily imitating ant over here. So I will use Semperfli Nano Silk in 50 denier black. I waxed it, and then I'll just cover the hook shank. Okay, cover the hook shank. Now cut the excess, and I know I said I will use some dubbing, but I'm just into peacock these days, and I think peacock works beautifully. So for that matter, I'll just use a couple of these barbs, but I want to make sure that I get thick enough. I want to make it like quite prominent abdomen here. I don't want to have thin one. So I'll break off a couple of barbs from the peacock feather, and then what I like to do is I'll just stroke back those barbules. So, and then counter spin the bobbin holder to make everything jump, and then I'll cover it and tie it in. I'll go into the bend a little bit, and now just invert the hook so I don't mess up with the hook point, and I'll wrap this barb in a clockwise manner around the thread, because when I start wrapping everything together, it will wrap together even more. And if I did it in the opposite way, in a anti-clockwise direction, as I would wrap it towards the eye, it will actually unwrap itself. So let's go. I'm just making an abdomen over here. And I'm swiping those barbules back a little bit. Okay. I'll go back a little bit here. Unwrap. catch it with a couple of reps here. I can just go towards the eye, then just break it off. No need to cut it. Now I want to do the same process again, well, to have those two segments, and then again I'll take maybe a little bit thinner barbs right now. This time I will cut the tips myself, counterspin the wound holder, catch those tips, pull them back a little bit. Okay, now I'll just repeat the process a couple of times. And make front segment. And when I'm satisfied, just stop, and with flat thread, now it's flat as you can see, I'll make, this is the part where I will tie the feather, and that's very important to have it flat. To tie in the feather, I'm tying it by the tip because the radius is thinner. Now I'll just fold one feather for you guys to see. So this part will go first over the hook, so I want to fold that one first. So hold my thumb over it, and press with my index finger, and then crease against my finger. I'm pulling it up, and I'm again doing the same motion, pulling it up, pulling it up. And I got nicely folded feather. Now, just cut the tip here to expose this triangle-like shape, which I will use for tying in. And use flat thread for this, because if you have good foundation for the tying in, the feather will wrap more beautifully. Try to use tight wraps. So one, I will use 2 or 3, 2, and one more I will add here, 3. Just go like this, go through the barbs, 1, 2, securing wraps here, and then I'll just push my scissors through the radius, so I don't cut any barbs that I don't want to cut. Like so. Just unwrap those and wrap this again. There was one stray barb that didn't listen, but still. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I did here was 1, 2, 3 to the back, and then 1, 2, 3 to the front, and I got a nice hat. So that was with finish. I forgot to do one important thing, because I'm using Semperfli Nano Silk to wax the head, the thread, before I do a whip finish. So I'll just do one whip finish now, and that's it. Wax helps it to be more durable. That's it. I got myself nice, wet, and super simple, and I'm sure super effective, and hopefully I will make some video with this fly and show you guys how it did. Until next time, keep safe and see you next time.